Rita from OneThingAlone.com. Thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate this time being able to share with you. And today I'm here with Ashleigh Slater, author of Team Us, and we're going to talk a little bit about marriage, about how to strengthen our marriages and how to work together with our spouses to have a stronger marriage. If you want to just go ahead and play this video in the background while you're doing dishes or folding laundry, that's fine. By all means, you don't have to look at our talking heads all throughout the interview, but we're so happy to have you here with us. And we're praying that this time is a blessing to you. Like I said, I'm joined today by Ashleigh. Ashleigh, thank you so much for coming on. And if you could just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, kind of what you do, and I don't know, whatever you want to tell us.
Okay, well, my name is Ashleigh, and I brought some pictures so I could show you my family.
Oh, yay!
Ted, and we met back in 2001 when I was in graduate school. And basically, long story short, a little over a year later, we were married. And we now have 4 kids, 4 girls, which people always go, wow, just think about the weddings. And I'm like, my husband's hoping that the way weddings work have changed by the time they grow up. But that's Olivia and Ava and Savannah and Dorothy. So we have the 4 of them. And then we also have a baby in heaven who we lost through a miscarriage. So we look forward to meeting that little one someday. And Ted and I have been married for almost 12 years. It'll be 12 years in December, and we live in Atlanta.
Wow. Well, that's a whirlwind romance there, a year to the wedding. That's amazing. But I love the picture of your 4 little girls. So adorable. So you wrote a book, which is very exciting, but you do a lot of writing. From what I understand. Tell us a little bit about Team Us.
Yes, I've been writing for 20 years. I started when I was 16, so I will let you do that easy math.
I was going to say, you started writing at 6? What?
But I love to retell the story of how I wrote Team Us because I am a homeschooling mom who, does some work from home and, writes a lot of articles, and I really was not pursuing writing a book at this point in my life. So when I tell the story, I'm always reminded of how God kind of did orchestrate the events. And it basically boils down to back in 2013, Moody contacted me and said, hey, do you have any interest in writing a book on relationships? Do you have any ideas? And I thought, I don't know that I want to write a book right now, but this might be from God, so I'm going to send them some ideas. And they liked one of them. And so I was like, okay, well, let me write a proposal because maybe this is from God. So I wrote the proposal, and they liked that, and I had a book contract, and I was writing the book. And so I really see it as God brought this about at this point in time for whatever purposes he has. And I tell friends, I say, if this book encourages one couple to get along better during the day with each other, then I have accomplished my purpose in writing it. But I really picked this idea of Team Us really came from me writing. I like to write from this perspective of write what you know. And so I think about, okay, Ted and I have learned that grace is a huge factor in our marriage, and it really impacts how we interact with each other. And out of that idea grew this idea of Team Us.
I love that story because I know as a writer, I know so often it's like you want to hustle, you want to push and kind of like share your words with the world because, you have something important to share. But I love stories when God brings that into someone's life. And it's just so clear that he's opening the door and he's, basically laying out the carpet and saying, I gave you a message. You need to share this with the world. That's wonderful. So Team Us. It's an intriguing concept, and I love how you share it about the grace that's in your marriage. So tell us a little bit about what does that look like, or how is that different from a couple who met in college and dated and got married? What are some of the things they face, and why do they need that type of a mentality?
Well, this kind of Team Us mentality, I think it's important because especially in our culture, we live in a very individualistic culture, and a lot of people approach marriage with this idea of how are you going to make me happy? This very me-centered approach instead of a us-centered or a team-centered approach. And then I think when you get married and you hit those rough spots where your spouse disappoints you, or which happens, I mean, it happens to all of us. We all
What? Never.
or they do something. Maybe they have a really weird, annoying habit, and you're like, I'm not sure I really like that habit or you right now. When you hit those moments and you sit back and you think, they're not making me happy right now. Did I make a mistake in getting married? I think that can come out of having this me-centered, or this how you're going to make me happy approach to marriage. And I really think this idea of team in marriage, of team us, can help couples have a paradigm shift to really look at marriage not from what can I get out of it, but instead, we're better together. And what can, specifically for Christian couples, what can God do through the two of us together that he wouldn't be able to do if we were apart? So I think that just this idea of being a team and being for each other and sticking together and having each other's back really can help couples just have a lot more unity in their marriages, which I think is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think you're spot on with that, like minor annoyances, because it's the little things that kind of just build and build and build until finally, you're fighting over who cooks chicken the right way, or, just something ridiculous. Not that, we would have ever argued about that, hypothetically speaking. So what can you do in that moment when, the stakes are high and it's not about how someone folds towels, it's about they don't respect me. They obviously, don't think I'm important because they're not doing it the way I think it should be done. How do you keep those differences from escalating to the point where you take things personally?
Ooh, that's a good question. I remember when Ted and I got married. He was in his 30s. I was in my 20s. We have some age difference there. And he had a very specific way that he wanted shirts folded. And I thought that was kind of dumb, but I thought, all right, well, it's important to him, so I'll go ahead and fold the shirts this way. I mean, he would do laundry too, but if I was doing laundry. And so I think that, those moments where maybe our spouse wants us to do something a certain way, maybe we can respectfully talk about it. There are times we need to talk about it if it's an issue that has become bigger than it should be. And then maybe there are other times we can just humble ourselves, like I did with the shirts, and say, you know what? I really don't care how shirts are folded, but you do. So I'm going to fold them this way because you care and because I love you. And then that's one way to not sweat the small stuff and not let it become much bigger than it should be. I mean, obviously, like I said, there are things you should talk about, and maybe you can talk about that later and laugh about it. But I think that it's kind of a balance of picking your battles and figuring out what is worth making a big deal out of.
Sure, and I love the concept of, how important is this to you? I know that my husband and I we often use a scale of 1 to 10 and say, I want to go somewhere on a date, and he really doesn't care for that place. He'll ask me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? And often it's not that big of a deal, and just that question helps to frame it in my head that it's not a hill worth dying on, and it really doesn't mean he doesn't love me because we don't eat Chinese or something like that. But at the same time, having that standard or that ability to express, this is an 8 or a 9 to me. This is something that is really close to my heart, is a way to kind of disengage from the emotional part of it and explain this is important. And then, like you said, having that humility to come in and say, if it's that important to you, then we can do that. And that's important. What are some other, I love the stories from your marriage, because I think it's so important to just be real and say, I love Jesus, my husband loves Jesus, we're both seeking Jesus together, but that doesn't mean we're immune from differences or from hardship or struggles. How do you keep that approach of being together and tackling life's challenges together when the going gets rough and when there are some much more difficult issues than how you fold laundry or where you go eat?
Yeah, well, we have faced some of those difficult issues, and I talk about them in the book. We had basically 2 years. I mean, we had other things prior to that, but we had 2 years of we had a miscarriage, we had job loss, we had a house that wouldn't sell, we had a major move, we had another job loss, we had another move, and we had all the financial issues that come with all of that in the process. And I think for us, it was a couple things. The biggest thing being realizing that it was not going to be me against you. It was not going to be me against Ted. If we went through something, we weren't going to step back and go, okay, it's your fault this is happening, and if you had done such and such, then maybe we wouldn't be where we are. Instead, going, okay, so here we are, we don't have a job, we need to figure out what to do, and let's band together. Let it be us against the problem. So really not viewing your spouse as the enemy, instead viewing them as your partner and figuring out, okay, how can we maneuver this? How can we make it through this? And I know also for us, we had to remember that, yes, we needed each other. We needed to band together and be united, but we couldn't just make it us. We needed the Lord. We needed to seek His wisdom and guidance, and we needed to encourage each other. Because when you're going through difficult things, the miscarriage, it affected both of us, but it affected me at a much deeper level than it did Ted. And so he was the one who was strong for me when I was weak. And then when he went through multiple job losses, I mean, men, they pull so much of their identity in their jobs, and I think that's a struggle for them not to pull too much identity. So when he went through the multiple job losses, he was the weaker one, and I was the stronger one. So just when we were the stronger one, encouraging the other one that God is good and He's taking care of us, and let's keep seeking Him. And then we also we reached out to our church body. I think your church community can really, help you. They can pray for you. They can rally beside you. So it's two things. It's, banding together. Don't turn against each other. And then looking outside of yourself, your team also, for support when you're going through difficult things.
Yeah, that's important. And it's so nice that you had that church body, to be there for you and to help support you, because those are difficult things to go through. And so important to go through it together because I think it's so wonderful the way God created marriage, where we have each other and we have those situations where, the one is stronger than the other and can help carry the burden and can help in those situations, and then the other person has the opportunity to do that as well. What do you feel are maybe some of the sneaky ways that get in between us having that team us mentality? What are maybe some of the ways where we can turn around and point fingers at our spouse instead of having them alongside us facing the issue?
That's a good question. I think that we have little things that pop up each day, whether it's financial stuff or parenting. For us, parenting is probably one of the most, parenting is hard. I'll just say that. Parenting is hard. And then Ted and I come at it from very different perspectives. I am like that firstborn, type A. I mean, I'm not like, my closet's a mess, so I'm not like a neat freak, but I'm very type A. I like to plan. I like to be in control of the situation. And Ted is the last born, boy who's very spontaneous, very out of the box thinking, very spur of the moment. And we agree with each other on all the big issues, but when it comes to the small issues, we don't always see eye to eye, and that can provide opportunities for us to have conflict, to have me against him. Like, well, why are you doing it that way? I would do it this way. And so I'm really learning in that respect to remember that I married my husband because he's different than me. He has different approaches, and I like that. And so how can I appreciate that when it comes to parenting? And I think that helps us from turning on each other in those moments of day-to-day life when we're not seeing eye to eye, and it would be very easy for us to turn against each other and say, you're not doing that the right way. You need to do it this way. So I think that's one example. But I think it also depends just on each couple. I mean, I think we all have our weak areas that we tend to have knee-jerk reactions in, and so we just have to personally be aware of what our triggers are.
What do you mean by triggers?
Like those things that upset us. Like, I mean, there are certain subject matters or individuals that might trigger a very emotional response for me if Ted and I are talking about something. And I'm having to learn that that really says more about me than it does the individual, that there's something, some sort of deeper issue going on in me, and I really need to go to the Lord and be like, okay, Lord, why am I reacting like this to this type of situation or this person constantly? Help me to figure out what's going on and work on that so that I'm not always having this knee-jerk reaction, which then impacts my husband and impacts our relationship and causes conflict. So a trigger is just those things that can get you emotionally wound up really quickly, and you might not even know why.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such wisdom there, and even acknowledging that they're triggers and that it's not something outside that's causing you to react that way, but maybe something inside. I know I have those people, those places, those situations that I seem to always react a certain way, and there's wisdom in recognizing maybe it's a heart issue for me. Maybe it's something that I need to, like you said, take to the Lord and have that conversation before I come back to my husband and bring it up again. And this is all assuming, I think, that we have a spouse who is kind of pulling alongside us and buys into that team us mentality. But what words of encouragement do you have to give someone who maybe is in a sunken marriage, or they feel like there's just no more hope here in this marriage? We've gone our separate ways. You know, we have years and years of just looking out for our own interests, and I recognize that, but there's just no way to move forward. What would you say to someone who's kind of in that situation?
Yeah, you know, I wrote an article, like I think it was half a year ago, and it was about how when we're struggling, it was about spring cleaning, and how when I start spring cleaning, it seems like a good idea, you know, because obviously there's stuff I need to go through and get rid of, and then midway through, I'm like, what did I do? Because it's much more messier, and it looks like I'm never going to get through this stuff. It's just a mess. Maybe I'll just throw it all in boxes, get rid of it, and just quit. And I think that when we have a lot of, just as I've observed different friends that we know or different couples, and just when Ted and I have had certain issues, when you start to decide to work through some deep issues that really need to be dealt with, that you have kind of buried and not done anything with, it's going to get messier before it gets cleaner. And you have to be willing to say, okay, I am willing to deal with the mess. I'm willing to go through the hard, because I hope that on the other side things are going to be better. And so I would just encourage couples to not be afraid of the hard, to be brave, to step out, and even though they may feel distance from their spouse at the moment, reach over, whether literally or metaphorically, reach out for their hands. Make the first step in being brave and connecting with them, and then don't be afraid to hash out and go through the hard, because ultimately it will make you stronger and it'll bring you closer. I've heard so many stories of couples that have gone through horrible things that you think, wow, how could their marriage have survived that? And then they come out on the other end and they're stronger than they were when they started. So I would say don't give up and don't be afraid, to brave the hard stuff and to work through it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say this team us approach works even when just one partner is working toward it and maybe the other partner just isn't interested, they're checked out, or like they just don't want to contribute to the marriage?
Well, I mean, it's hard to be a team if there's only one of you working, because it's not more than one person. But I think that something that I tell my kids is, especially if we're having some sort of situation where they share a room and they're both supposed to be cleaning up the room, and only one of them is, and they stop cleaning to tell me, Mom, she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing, so I'm going to stop doing it because she's not doing it either. And I say to them, you can't control what she does, but you can control what you do. So be faithful to do what you're supposed to do. Be faithful to clean up your room and be obedient. And that's what I would say, to, a spouse who feels like their spouse is not contributing, they're not pulling their weight, they're not investing, is do it unto the Lord and be faithful to continue to try and to pour it into your marriage, because you don't know, how that is going to all work out. You don't know what kind of seeds you're going to, reap later from that. So just be faithful to do what God is having you do in your marriage.
That's a good word. We can't really control what our husbands do, but we can always have control over what we do. What do you feel is the most overwhelming part about being married, or about, working toward unity with your spouse? Do you ever get to that point where you're like, I give up. I don't think I can do this anymore. It's just too hard.
I think Ted and I generally, we both come from communication backgrounds, although we both have degrees in communications, and Ted will say, well, it's not because we think we're ooh, we're so great at it, it's because we know we need work. And in general, we communicate well, but sometimes we will slip into seasons where we start having these communication misses, where we're talking, but our meaning is completely going past the other person, and sometimes just one of those will then turn into another one and another one. And I think for me, and probably Ted, that's sometimes the most overwhelming and stressful part of being married, especially since we do communicate so well most of the time, is having those times when we just can't seem to communicate and trying to figure out how to fix that, because it takes work, and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. And so to me, that's probably one of the most overwhelming things. In addition to parenting, like I said, parenting can be stressful.
Right, yeah. So as we wrap up, I can't believe 20 minutes just flew by. But as we wrap up, I would love to hear what you do to find joy in the midst of marriage and parenting and all the hard stuff that comes along with it. What are some ways that you're intentional to cultivate a joyful attitude and to really build into your relationship with Jesus? Because being a mother of 4 children, I can't imagine. I have one, and she keeps me busy all day. So what are some ways that you just keep that joyful attitude and you're able to pour into other people because you have your heart full?
I think for me, the biggest thing, and this is a struggle for me, this is something that I am learning to have to be very intentional about doing, is just gratitude, is looking around, and instead of thinking, ooh, I wish this child wasn't throwing a fit right now, or I wish my husband would have hung that picture 2 weeks ago, or whatever, is instead being grateful and saying, oh, look what he did. He bought me coffee, my favorite, and brought it home, or wow, look at how well this child is interacting with this one. So I think a big part of having joy in just the daily stresses of life and parenthood and marriage is really looking for those things that you can be thankful for. I think that's the biggest thing. And I know when I fall into those days where I'm not actively looking for things to be thankful for, I don't feel joyful. It's when I am going, oh, Lord, thank you. I'm so grateful for this. And sometimes it's just the tiny things. I'm grateful for the fact that we have a fireplace when it's chilly out, or, that our kids are, not fighting right now.
Not this very moment. They're getting along well right now.
That's one thing, and I talk about in the book about marriage is, when you are actively appreciating the ways that your spouse is growing and changing, instead of looking at the ways that they haven't reached your ideal, you can be a lot happier. You can have a lot more joy in your marriage, I think. Looking for the best and being grateful are huge.
Yeah. Well, hey, to wrap up, I would love to hear what's one thing that you are grateful for about your husband today?
Yes, well, Ted keeps me laughing. He is one of those guys that he can be very squirrely. He can be a prankster and have a very dry sense of humor. And so I think that throughout the years, whether we've been in good times or in the hard times, he always keeps me laughing. And I think that laughing together is so important in marriage. So I am thankful that he just has a great sense of humor and knows how to make me laugh.
Aw, that's great. I think Ted and my husband would get along well because my husband has this great sense of humor too. And you're right, that's one of the things I appreciate the most about him, is that even in the midst of the most difficult situation, 2 weeks ago we were in the hospital with my father-in-law. He had a heart attack, and it was like really hard. In the midst of it, he was able to crack a joke at the silliest thing and just kind of diffuse that tension and be able to bring a smile to everyone's face. And that's such a gift because I'm totally not. And you're right. That's something that I think it's easy to overlook or maybe sometimes get annoyed. Or we can choose to appreciate that and be joyful that God has given us husbands who make life more fun. Any closing thoughts or words that you would like to share with our readers about marriage or parenting or laughing at husbands' jokes or anything else?
Oh, I guess just, I just like to encourage couples to really, be purposeful about every day growing together. Because I think when you're being very, purposeful, you're making the effort to connect and have unity, each day, you're going to be less likely to find yourself in those crisis moments. I mean, there's always exceptions to things, but I think in general, just really making that effort, you're going to see the benefits in your marriage. So just, pour into your marriage, not just, at big moments, but in just the daily little things.
Good word there. Well, in wrapping up, where can people find you?
Yes, they can go to ashleighslater.com, and I'm actually on Facebook a lot and Instagram, so they can find links to both of those on my website if they kind of want to follow along and see the random things I post from daily life. So. Okay.
And Tea Must is on Amazon, I'm assuming, and in bookstores as well. And it's also part of a Ultimate Christian Living bundle sale that's going on November 5th through the 11th. Actually a great discount. It's like 85% discounted as part of that bundle. So if you're interested, I'll have links posted in the show notes. You can go ahead and click on that and read Ashleigh's great book. Such an encouragement to marriages. Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like we could just talk and talk and talk. We'll have to do it again sometime, maybe when your next book comes out. But thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you want to get up to date, stay up to date with what's going on with Ashleigh, go ahead and follow her on her blog or Facebook. You can also go to OneThingAlone.com and subscribe to get updates about videos or devotionals, posts, and free resources that will encourage you in your walk with Jesus. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.